Welcome, everybody. My name is Mina Jane, and I am the director of the Ashland Public Library in Massachusetts, and super excited to be here with our second session with author Kristan Higgins making recommendations for women's fiction books. And it's going to be a quick half hour. We're going to talk a lot about everything, but if you have questions, put them in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. If you just want to chat with each other, feel free to do that in the chat, as well as putting your own recommendations in the chat. And I'll send out a long list after today's session with the recording. So don't feel like you have to be scribbling madly with, with the recommendations. I would like to thank the Friends of the Ashland Public Library for supporting all of our programs. And I would like to thank Kristan for letting us share this program with other libraries because, libraries, magic, all that.
Libraries are the best. I was just in my library today.
That's right. Book sale, right?
Yeah, I'm chairing the book sale. I am the right person for the job, but I was like, more work than you ever think.
Totally, I know. So yeah, Kristen's going to be making recommendations. I'm going to share my screen with the covers so you can get a quick glimpse of them, but hopefully we'll do that just for a couple seconds and then we'll continue. We'll just chat. So Kristan Higgins, as you know, is an amazing, amazing writer. Started off from romance, where my heart is, and now has moved into women's fiction and reads a ton. So Kristan, what are you going to recommend to us today?
Okay, I've got a I think a very diverse group of books just in terms of where they are, where they're set. So the first book that I loved this past few months was The Wedding People by Alison Esbach. And I loved this book because it's everything I wanted in women's fiction. It's sad, it's funny, it's got depth and humor, it's got people you love to hate and wonderful people. Sometimes they're the same person. So the premise is Phoebe is an adjunct professor. She is just at a real low point in her life. Her husband has left her for her best friend. She's battled infertility and lost. She's divorced, and now her beloved and ancient cat died. So she checks into this very posh hotel in Newport, Rhode Island, and decides that she will kill herself using her cat's pain medication as her drug of choice. And however, there's a wedding at the hotel, and this very over the top bride runs into her. She's the only person in the hotel not associated with the wedding. And the bride kind of demands to know, what are you doing here? And when Phoebe tells her, she's like, no, 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 that would ruin my wedding. That will ruin my wedding. If there's a body being wheeled out through the lobby, no, you can't do it. And this weird, almost confessional relationship pops up between the two of them where they're really talking in depth because they're strangers.
Mm-hmm.
So I loved this, just the premise of, I think I'll end my life during somebody's wedding, and the conflict that went along with it. I loved the writer's voice. I loved that she touched on some really serious subjects. Infertility was just so heart-rendingly accurately represented. The loneliness that she suffers is just beautifully wrought, and yet it's really funny too. So I highly recommend that one. Nina, you also read it.
Yes, I did.
You had thoughts?
I did have thoughts, but I actually really enjoyed this. Now, everybody who knows me knows that I'm a romance reader. And so the quick story is that the local bookstore was starting a romance book club and they picked this book. And as you know, it is not a romance. It is definitely women's fiction, very well written, I thought. And as you said, funny interactions, very funny interactions. And like sort of a happily ever after sort of, but not as a couple, but like she finally kind of figures some stuff out and it's through
Yeah,
like
plot spoiler, she doesn't kill herself.
there's a whole book of where she has not killed herself.
She is the narrator, so we kind of need her.
That's right. But like she has great interactions with all of Lila's family and friends. Like she has like
Yeah,
these really meaningful discussions with them. And you're like, and it's kind of like because I don't care. Like I almost
right,
died, right?
right. And I've been in situations where I'm the odd man out. And so, it is easier to talk to someone who's got no horse in the race and tell them what you honestly feel. And so you're almost like a voyeur to this wedding through Phoebe's eyes. And it is such a grotesque wedding. I mean, it's $1 million wedding that the bride is throwing for herself. And there is, think of anything you could possibly think of, like bachelorette, sex toy party, welcome dinner, rehearsal brunch, everything is in it. She will spare nothing for herself. And yeah, you really start to see a different side to the bride. And she's the next, maybe most important character in the book.
Mhm.
So I really loved the two women at these different junctions of their life, and how they each help each other find their way.
Mhm.
So highly recommended that. It just, the voice and the humor carried me right through it. I thought it was delightful.
Was this her first book? Do you know? It
I
wasn't, right?
think it was
Okay, I'll have to look that up.
first or
Um,
second, but yeah, she's new to me anyway. So,
maybe me as well.
and the cover is great too. It's really
Good. I did have a question for you about this because I saw that this was on the list. And now you told me the first time I met you when I was at the Bacon Free Library and you were talking about, I can't remember which book because they're all so good, but it was the one where the woman was with the sister was with a guy. They had three children and he cheated on her.
yes.
Right. And you told us the story of how you came up with that idea, which was like can you just repeat it really quick?
Yeah, I was waiting for friends in the foyer of a Chili's or something, and we had just gone to see Magic Mike, the second part, and so I was like in a very giddy, silly mood, and I see this lady sitting there, and I'm like, "Hey, how you doing?" I just went to see Magic Mike 2, and it was a masterpiece. And she said, "I just found out my husband is cheating on me, and we have 7-year-old twins." And I thought that if he ever cheated on me, that would be the line in the sand I couldn't cross. But now that the moment is here, I don't know what to do. And I just thought, like, oh my God, that's so horrible. And also, like, can I record this? because because it was like such a conundrum, right? It is something that's easy to say. If you cheated on me, that would be it. But if you're a stay-at-home mom with little kids, what will you do? And it's, you're not just talking about the loss of your marriage, but also the loss of your family and big disruption in your children's lives. So that spurred that idea. And I do like to say, like, I have a talk to me face. People do open up to me, in the elevator or in an Uber or something like that. So I get a lot of good stuff. So I did kind of relate to Phoebe in that
Mhm.
respect, of everybody telling her their innermost thoughts.
I thought of you right away when you put this on your list because I was like, that's exactly what happened to you. And except for the cat pills, it's just you.
Yeah, the cat pills just, you think like, oh, this is very serious. And then you realize like what she's going to do is like take 4 pills meant for an 11-pound cat. It's
Best
not
thought
really a
out
well
plan.
thought out plan.
That's funny. All right. Enough about us, right? Like let's
Yes.
move on to the next one because I have a question about this one too, and I'll get to it as soon as you tell us all about it.
Okay, which one is it? Let's see.
Pam Jenna.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so Pam Jenoff is one of my absolute favorite authors of all time. And this book is Last Twilight in Paris. So we're in post-war England, post-World War II England. And we have Louise kind of struggling to find her footing as a housewife and a mom. And because when she was young, she was part of the war effort. She went to France to help visit POWs and get them supplies and stuff. And now, like, so she was important and she was doing dangerous stuff, and now she's wondering, like, what should I make for dinner? But she has a part-time job at a thrift store, and she's going through a box of costume jewelry, and she sees a necklace, and she's sure that she's seen the necklace before and that she saw it in France, and it might have some answers to do with the death of her friend who went around France with her. She was a performer, and it was like, entertain the troops kind of thing. And the death of her friend was ruled an accident, but she never was sure that it was. So then we go back in time, 10 years ago, or yeah, I guess about 10, 12 years ago, to Helene, who's a wealthy French daughter of a very prominent Jewish Parisian family. And she's been very sheltered. And like so many people during World War II, they thought like, well, it won't happen to me, to us, like my father is very well connected and we're very wealthy. And we've had dinner with the mayor of France all the time. Here's Hawk jumping up on my desk to join me.
Oh,
Hello.
we knew we'd have some visitors tonight.
He's very interested in this book as well. So Helene, of course, finds herself, taken off the street and put into a concentration camp that, according to Pam's research, existed right in the middle of Paris. And it was housed in a department store. And like nobody knew about it, but everybody knew about it. So these workers were locked inside and they were work 18-hour days and fed a crust of bread, and their job was to sort through the stolen belongings of Jewish Parisian families. So Pam intertwines these storylines magically, seamlessly. And what I love about her writing is it's so vivid and it's so powerful. You really feel like you are in the London fog, or you're in Paris, your heart sinking as the swastikas drop from the Arc de Triomphe and stuff. So it's just like a one sitting read. You just can't put it down. I think I finished it at like 2:30 in the morning. And I read her author's note, and she says in the book, she picks her next idea by a historical fact that makes her gasp. So she came across this story about the department store. I think it was like a more of a home goods store in real life that was right there, like, where everybody shopped, especially like wealthier Parisians shopped. And then it's locked from the outside, and all these people are kept in it in these horrible conditions. If you make a mistake, if you get sick, off you go to a camp where you will certainly die.
Mm.
And the moral conundrums, what's the plural of that, Mina? Conundri. The moral dilemmas in this story are just so intense. Um, a Jewish woman married to a Christian man. How far do you go to help when it puts your own family at risk? Um, what does it all mean in the end? Your little part in the war, or what you did or didn't do, and it was just fantastic, like all of Pam's books.
Mm-hmm.
So, go ahead.
That dual timeline thing is really interesting to me, that a lot of people are doing that. But the question I have, and I'm going to kind of ask quickly because I want to get through all of your books, is that we talked about the difference between romance and women's fiction, but what is the difference between women's fiction and historical fiction? Because I always think of Pam Jenoff as historical fiction.
I mean, she is. I think women's fiction is just a broad category of fiction,
Mm-hmm.
and it can be literary fiction, like an Anne Tyler book. But basically, the distinguishing factor is the protagonist is a female,
Okay.
and it's usually written by a female. So, for whatever reason, publishing decided that we women needed to be put on a different shelf than just fiction. Yes, she's definitely historical fiction, but her story is also very much about the time, but about the character. So it's a little more character driven than maybe other kinds of historical fiction, where this is really about these two women and the personal stakes that they have in the war. So I hope that's a good answer.
That is a good answer.
Pam would agree.
Yeah, I like the umbrella sort of picture of that. Okay, so V.E. Schwab.
Yeah, so this book was recommended to me by my friend, the writer Jamie Beck,
Mm-hmm.
and I downloaded it and I spent, I listened to it 17 hours long, and I was transfixed. It's incredible narration for one, but the lesson of this book is be careful what you wish for, and it's such a universal theme, and such, like, everybody thinks, if only I had fill in the blank, and then you get that and maybe it doesn't look like what you thought. So we meet Adeline LaRue. She's about to be married to a man she's barely met. It's in the 1700s in France, and she lives in this little village, and she begs God to spare her. And when God doesn't, she prays to the gods who answer after dark, according to like the old witchy woman in the village. And one comes through. And she says, I want to be free. And she gets what she wants from this dark god whose name is Luc, short for Lucien, reference to Lucifer. And it does not look like what she thought it would look like. In order to be free, Luc says, no one can remember you. You can't be entangled with somebody and still be free. So every time she leaves a room, people forget who she is. And if she's with someone, they fall asleep, they wake up and they don't know who she is. Her parents don't know who she is. She's completely alone in the world. She can make a friend for 12 hours until they fall asleep, and then it's over. And we go through time with her because she can only die when she agrees to give her soul to Luc. And then he will free her from this hellish life that she's living. But she's really stubborn, and she tries to find ways to be happy. Like she'll meet the same guy every day for 6 months in a row because she's fallen in love with him. She remembers him, but every day is the first day for him. So then she goes, it's modern day, and she goes into this little used bookstore in New York City, and she does what she always does in bookstores. She shoplifts because as soon as she leaves the bookstore, they won't know who she is. But the guy runs out of the store and says, hey, you didn't pay for that. And he's the first person in 300 years who's remembered her. And so clearly he's special in some way too. I really loved the premise of this book. I thought it was brilliant. I've never come across an idea like that you are forgotten constantly by everyone. You can have no human attachments. I loved the love-hate relationship between Adeline and Luc. And I was definitely dying to figure how this was going to resolve. And I did have a little, a little uncertainty about Henry, who is the bookstore worker who can remember her, and sort of what his deal was and why he was the one. But I really loved its ending. It felt very true to the very intense, well-developed, long story that came before it. So I thought it was a great read for book clubs, and it will give you a lot to think about. So
it
that was
sounds like it.
a great one.
Is B.E. Schwab now? This is my librarian hat coming out, which is a little bit scuffled. Isn't that Flowers in the Attic?
No, that's not.
Help us out
No,
here,
not the
people.
same person. No. We all read those books when we were like, I don't know, this was 40 years ago that we were reading
Yeah,
these books,
yeah.
What was her name?
VC Andrews.
VC Andrews.
Thank
Yep,
you.
someone in the
Thank
chat,
you.
I'm sure knew. No, not at all like that.
Well, I was
Nothing
gonna say, it sounds almost like
incestuous, lurid.
Wait, you were saying umbrella, and I was like, maybe this is like the horror side of women's fiction.
No. I mean, it was, I guess, magical realism would be
Oh,
one of the terms for this. Maybe fantasy, but it was so realistic in terms of her day-to-day life. Like she wasn't magic, or she wasn't, fabulously wealthy or anything. She was just forgotten all the time. So there is that little element of magic, but it's, more akin to Alice Hoffman, where the events could happen with this little bit of magic thrown in.
oh my God. I've got to read that. I have
Yeah.
not yet, but that sounds really good. Okay, let's go.
Next one on my list is Good Bad Girl. All
Yep.
right, Good Bad. I'll read anything Alice Feeney writes. After Daisy Darker, which I thought was a masterpiece, she can, write her grocery list and I'll buy it. So Good Bad Girl is this really wonderful twisting story of four women We've got Edith, Cleo, Frankie, and Patience. And we don't know how they're linked. It was a complete mystery, and I kept trying to untangle it as I read the book, and I couldn't, which is always so satisfying for me because, as a writer, you're familiar with plot devices, and you see little hints and things that maybe someone who doesn't live in books every day the way writers do might miss. But in this one, I couldn't figure it out. So we've got Edith. She's this crusty, cranky octogenarian. She lives in a care home in England, and Patience works there as a housekeeper. And then we have Cleo, who's Edith's daughter. She's single, she's childless, she's a therapist. She has a horrible brother who is really fun to hate. And then we have Frankie, who is Patience's mother. And she and Patience haven't seen each other in a year. So, and also there's a missing baby, and who that baby is and where that baby went takes a really long time to figure out. Each character was so beautifully written, had so much depth to them, and so many secrets, so many issues, so much hurt. But as the story goes on and the characters intersect, the mystery of their connection you get more and more desperate to find out how it all works out. It's not a mystery. It's not a thriller the way some of the books that I recommend are. It's just four women and their lives and how they intersect, and the sorrows of their life, the things that they're searching for, their hopes. It's just really brilliant. And as I said, Alice Feeney is brilliant, and I love her work. So
I don't think I can add anything to that. I agree, 100%. I did miss a question about Addie LaRue asking if it's a bit like The Husbands by Holly Gramazio. Have you read that?
I have not.
I was just
Add it to the
looking.
list, Mina.
I definitely will. It looks fascinating. It's some similar like memory issue, kind of disappearing from somebody's memory and things like that. So I will definitely send that.
Okay, cool. Thanks for the recommendation.
Yeah, it's from Margaret. Margaret.
Thanks, Margaret.
Yeah. So, all right, this one we did talk about in the next one.
This is Sex, Lies, and Sensibility by Nikki Payne, who is so funny and so delightful. And it's obviously an homage to Sense and Sensibility. Nikki describes herself as Jane Austen's sassy Black friend. But what she does is this pitch perfect homage to Sense and Sensibility. You laugh out loud through the whole thing. We've got the Dash sisters. We've got, calm, sensible Nora, and we've got passionate, madcap, impulsive Marianne, right? And they find out that their dad has another family, and they find this out at his funeral. Right? And his legal wife says, by the way, you're not in the will. And they've been living very, very high on the hog, very comfortably. But they do get to inherit this literally rotting inn on the coast of Maine. So, right. You already know you're going to love this book. Coast of Maine, an old inn. And the sisters have a year to fix it up before it will be foreclosed on. So the inn sits on land that has been owned by or used by this very handsome, responsible Native American man named Ennis. He's from the local Abenaki tribe, and he runs tours, like these hokey tourist tours on the land. He's called Bear. And the last thing he wants is like a soulless corporation trying to take over and use the land, raise the inn, and make splashy condos and stuff. So the sparks between them were fantastic. They're both such nerds, and I loved that about them. They're awkward, they're hot. It's pretty steamy in parts. So if you like that kind of thing, it's very well done. And they both have pasts that they would rather not go into, and their siblings and secondary characters are are so great, so interfering, so, trying to help and doing damage, that kind of thing. But what they realize, the message of the book is like, your past doesn't define you. Your past mistakes don't define you, even in the digital age where they will live on forever. So I'd say this is one of the best rom-coms I've ever read, and definitely the best riff on Jane Austen. So
Wow. Well, again, I have to 100% agree. I love Nikki Payne. I just interviewed her on a panel recently, last week actually. And when she wasn't actually the speaker, she was like, for everybody else, like super supportive of everybody else
yeah,
on the
yeah,
panel.
she's
Um,
fantastic.
and really wise. And I think you had said that you've gone out for drinks with her. She must be a
Yeah.
hoot.
Yeah, yeah, she's wonderful. I just have to say, Mina, your favorite writer's husband, Mick Irish, is here with our puppy. I did promise a glimpse of Buttercup, and you get a little Mick Irish as well. Here she is, our little baby.
Hello. Oh, she needs her moment of delight. I mean, she's
Oh,
not overshadowing you,
no,
McIris,
no, not at
but
all.
she is really cute.
So this is our new family member. And
Hi,
lean
Mina.
down and say hi.
Hi, Mina.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, look at all the hearts.
I
Buttercup.
always tell people that the
Here
time I
he
met you,
is.
you gave me like the biggest, strongest hug I probably ever had. And
That's
I
the
still talk
first day I
about
met him. I got that hug, and that's why we're married. Yeah.
it. That's probably why you're still married. Oh my God, so
He
adorable.
carried her up here because we don't want her to know she can climb stairs.
Oh,
Giving
very
the cat
smart.
safe haven. So,
Keep her little as long as you can.
yes. Thank you, sweetie.
Just, oh my gosh.
I'll see you soon. I'll come worship you soon.
See you, Mina.
Bye. Thank you. Thanks for the visit. All right. So we just have a couple more minutes. Let's get to the last
Okay.
book, although we can gush about Nikki all day long.
Yes, I know. So definitely look her up. So my last book is one of those dark noir thrillers that I love. It's called Things We Do in the Dark by Jennifer Hillier. And we've got a dead stripper, we've got a fire, a murder, and a huge inheritance. So what's not to love? Um, Paris Peralta, our heroine, wakes up one morning with a bump on her head and she's lying in a puddle of her husband's blood. Jimmy Peralta, he's a comedian making a comeback on Netflix, and his death is eventually ruled a suicide, but Paris doesn't think so. And she's also the number one suspect. But she was in Canada that night, or maybe she wasn't, or what she was doing in Canada, we're not really sure. What most people don't know is that her mom is a convicted murderer and she's about to be paroled. This is a dark book. Paris was abused as a child. Um, she went through a really horrible life with her mom, and and she finds a way to distance herself from that and make a better life for herself. I really love those stories of rising from a terrible childhood and becoming like mentally healthy after all the trauma that you've endured. So there is like a lot of trigger warnings in this book. But I loved not only like how are we going to find out what happened to Jimmy, but also what's going to happen with her mother.
Mhm.
And the only thing that I had an issue with, and I like had to stop mid book and read about Jennifer, the depiction of the Filipino characters in the book, they're basically all pretty horrible.
Mm.
And so I'm like, this is pretty racist. And I look up and she is Filipino herself. Um, but the family that Paris comes from is just morally bankrupt and awful. And it was a little disconcerting to like, I'm like, is there a nice family member? Is there a nice Filipino not related to them? So it was a little, well, but if that's your people, hopefully Jennifer's family is much, much nicer than that. So it's really gritty women's fiction, but it is such a twisted tale and so much to unpack. And I listened to it, and the narration was fantastic. So it really, I think, always elevates a book to be able to hear the characters' voices so beautifully depicted. So
Mhm.
highly recommend.
From this list from today, I feel like we should rename this program to Fiction Rex by Kristen.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it doesn't, they're just fiction. They're just,
They just happen to be written by women.
yeah.
And, and I think in a sense, like, yes, champion us. We write more than half of all fiction sold. And if you want to spotlight women authors, sure, you can call it women's fiction, but to say like Kristen Hanna is a women's fiction author, she's an author. She's a great American author, and
Mhm.
she's a woman. So it is kind of a title that I think it helps bookstores know where to put things.
Mhm.
And that's about all you can say about women's fiction. It is really just fiction written by women. So
Awesome. I mean, and I'm so glad to hear that there's such a wide variety for us because we read so widely and widely and varietally.
yes, romance readers will read anything that's not nailed to the floor. And that's certainly my experience too. Romance is my first love in books, and I can't go that long without reading one, but um I think romance is women's fiction as well.
Absolutely. It's that umbrella that you talked about, which totally makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So, Kristen, thank you so much. I really appreciate this. It's been fabulous. We have some great books to read, but we've also had a great discussion, and I really appreciate that.
My pleasure. Thanks everybody for tuning in. We really appreciate it.
Excellent. Everybody have a good night. Happy reading, and we'll see you in 3 months with Kristen again.
Absolutely.
Bye.